Hello and thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm Jordan Sloop, your host from Kentik Marketing. Our topic today is the value of performance mesh testings for ISPs, CDNs, telcos, and cloud service providers. Our presenters are Kentik's Director of Product Management, Anil Murty, and Platform Architect, Machacek. In today's webinar, Anil and Martin will review how Kentik Synthetics mesh test can be used to build a live latency report and proactively monitor pop-to-pop performance. During the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in the Zoom chat, and we will answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll pass it on to you, Anil.
Thank you, Jordan. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. In the interest of time, I'm going to jump right in. So for folks that are not familiar with Kentik, I'll do a quick introduction. Kentik has been around for a little over 7 years now, and we consider ourselves very fortunate to have more than 300 customers across the service provider and digital business segments. Some of these customers are some of the biggest brands in the world that you may have heard of. Some of the logos are at the bottom of the screen here. One of the things that our customers rate us really high on customer satisfaction for year after year is because they believe that our solution enables them to increase their uptime for their services as well as their networks by more than 25%. And so the way Gentic does this is by ingesting trillions of records of data every single day about our customers' networks, their services, and their applications, and provides essentially a platform that lets them visualize the data and make sense of it and then answer any questions about it. And so the way all this happens within the platform is through essentially what we refer to as network observability. And there's basically two aspects to this. On the left side here is a bunch of telemetry sources of data that Kentik ingests. These telemetry sources can be physical devices that are running within your networks or within your data centers. They might be virtual devices that are running within public cloud regions that you essentially own through the public cloud providers, or they might be synthetic tests that you configured as well. In addition to ingesting all this data, Kentik also gives you the option of enriching all that data with your own business-specific context before it ends up in the Kentik platform. And so once all this data is in the Kentik SaaS platform, Kentik then crunches through all this data and produces a set of dashboards, a free-form query engine, as well as analytics that enable you to be able to ask any questions about the overall status and health of your networks. In addition to doing all that, we also expose a set of notification and alerts systems to the most common third-party alerting and notification platforms. So the way all this gets presented within the Kentik platform is through a set of products, chief among which is one of the products that we're going to talk about today, which is Kentik Synthetics. So the focus today is Kentik Synthetics. So I'll do a quick overview of what Kentik Synthetics is. Essentially, the idea with Kentik Synthetics is to enable you to be able to proactively monitor every part of your network. And it doesn't matter if that network is entirely owned by you, or it is some sort of hybrid network where part of it is your own network and part of it is the general internet or cloud provider. And we do this essentially by providing the idea of agents. And these agents are essentially two types. There are agents that we provide out of the box that are hosted and maintained by Kentik. These are what we refer to as global agents. And then there are agents that you can install within your own infrastructure, which is basically the same software image that we package and give you. So these agents are then capable of running tests across the different layers of the network stack and producing results that enable you to look at the health of your systems. There's several key innovations that Kentik does that are very unique to the Kentik platform. I won't go through every single one of these because we have done this in past webinars and we have plenty of information on our website. Specifically today, we're going to focus on two of these key innovations. We're going to talk about this idea of mesh testing, which is the idea of being able to monitor the overall health of a global network of points of presence or data centers, and then being able to dig deeper from there and visualize that in a path visualization. So before I get into all of that, we have a quick question for you, which is, are you using any sort of solution today to monitor pop-to-pop performance? And when I say pop-to-pop performance, I'm talking about not just points of presence, which apply obviously to digital businesses, but also potentially, connectivity between data centers, connectivity within a data center, things that service providers care about. So you should be seeing a poll on your screen right now. I would really appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to just answer those questions for us. Thank you. Thank you, Jordan. Thanks, everyone, for taking the poll. All right, so it looks like we've got a mix of people that are using some of the solutions today or are potentially looking to learn how they can do this. So I think hopefully you'll find from the presentation today that will answer a little bit about both of those. So we'll talk about what exactly is a network mesh, and then we'll talk about what value Kentik specifically brings to this sort of testing. So to talk about what a network mesh is at a high level, the idea here is you have n different locations, and these locations may be independent data centers. They might be global points of presence if you're a digital business. There might be public cloud instances inside AWS, Azure, or GCP, for example. Or there could be any combination of the above things, right? So all of those are perfectly valid types of situations where you might want to use this. The main thing or the main value that these mesh tests and visualizations bring is essentially the way they scale. So to put this in perspective, every time you're setting up one of these meshes between endpoints, we are creating n times n minus 1 tests, and we're running these tests continuously. So to give you an example, if you have a mesh running with 10 different global points of presence, and you want to be testing from every point of presence to every other one, you're setting up 10 times 9 or 90 different tests that are running continuously. But if you increased that number by 2 and went to 20 locations, and now you're doing 20 by 20 tests, rather than it increasing from 90 to 180, now you're actually doing 20 times 19 or 380 tests. So, basically what I'm trying to communicate here is as the number of locations increases, where you want to be testing connectivity between, the number of tests you've got to set up between them does not scale linearly, but it actually scales exponentially. And that's where, the scalability aspect of this comes in. The other part is that, you might choose to run these really frequently, or you might choose to run them only every so often. Having the flexibility to be able to do that is a very key aspect as well. And all of these are things that we offer in our mesh solution. So to show you how all this looks really quickly, here's a rather extreme example of this. So here we've got close to 100 different points of presence located in various public cloud as well as non-public cloud regions. So up top, you can see this combination of AWS, Azure, or GCP, as well as potentially some data center locations here. What each of these squares here is representing is a set of tests that are running between the two points of presence that are intersecting on the rows and the columns here. So in this particular one where the cursor is focused, we've got Azure Central US testing towards AWS US East 2, and we're running the same test in both directions. And so when you hover over this, you can see that there's ping, latency, and jitter metrics, going both ways, and we show that information to you here. But what's more important is that rather than you having to look at hundreds and hundreds of rows of results from all of these tests across multiple pages, we're showing you a quick view where you can get a quick sense of whether overall your network is performing well, as indicated by green dots, or are there points where there are issues happening, as indicated by orange or red dots. Further, you can also quickly know if the orange or red dot happens to be a metric that you care about, like latency or packet loss, or is it something that you may not care about, like jitter, maybe. So that's the idea here, is to give you a really high level view first before you start drilling down into the details. So to talk specifically about what the kind of information you get from this, it sort of fits into three main buckets. Number one is the super high level view where we show you the three metrics that you care about as a network engineer: latency, packet loss, and jitter. And we show you this at a super high level view, so you don't have to look at every single test. You can just focus on the ones where there is some issues happening. And then when you do notice something that you care about, like in this case, latency and packet loss, you can then click on the view details, which then takes you to this kind of a view, which shows you those same metrics, but now just for that specific agent pair or that specific location pair. So now we're looking at just those two, and it's showing you each of these metrics over time. And so what this helps you do now, it helps you understand if there was an issue where in this case is 50% packet loss, was that a sustained event that was, potentially packet loss over several hours, or was it just a spurious spike that happened once and it never happened again? So in this case, you can see it happened to be a spurious spike, and we don't, it's not super alarming to us. And so that's a way to sort of disambiguate that. The next thing you can do is if you notice an issue like this, and if it's sustained, and you want to figure out, is it an issue that is happening because of a device within my own network, or is it happening because potentially some service provider or transit provider that my packets are going through is introducing some amount of delay that they need to go and address. So to help you do that, what we do is every time we run one of these tests, we essentially send two different probes. We send a set of ping probes that are computing the latency, packet loss, and jitter metrics, and then we send a set of trace route probes that are basically building what I refer to as a visual trace route. So this third image here is of that visual trace route, again going between those same two locations here. And what it's showing you is a hop by hop representation of the packets as they go from this Acme server 1 data center to basically the cloud region located in Iowa. And so for each of these, you get information about what specific node it is, which specific AS it's located within, and if it happens to be a node that we're getting SNMP metrics for either, like for example a device that's within your own data center, we'll pull out those in the same context. And so if you notice something that a situation where a link is experiencing a high amount of congestion or there's packet loss happening on a device, you can rule out issues like high CPU utilization or memory utilization. So just some level of detail in terms of being able to root cause the issue. The last thing I'm going to talk about, so I talked about being able to be proactively monitoring this, and I talked about being able to root cause things. But the third use case here is once you root cause something and you find out that it's not something that you can change because it's in somebody else's network, you want to be able to share these results so that they see exactly what you're seeing. And so to enable you to do that, Gentic essentially offers you three different options. And these options are basically an increasing level of complexity in terms of what you need to do on your side. But at the same time, they offer a higher level of customization. So the first and most basic one is what we refer to as public link sharing. The idea here is you just click a button, you enter an email address, and it shares this exact view with somebody else that might not have a Gentic account. So once somebody gets this link, they can just click on it, and they look at exactly the same kind of charts and trace route views that you're looking at without having to create a Gentic account and without getting access to the rest of your Gentic network account, so to speak. The second one here is our custom branded portal. The use case here is if you happen to have a customer that you're basically offering, let's say, a managed service towards, or for whatever reason the customer is interested in continuously looking at the tests that are running, you can create a bunch of synthetic tests and then expose them within this custom branded portal. That will be behind the login. So it won't be exposed to the general public, but the specific customer can log in and they can look at a portion of your synthetic testing. And then the last option here is if you as a service provider want to showcase your performance, your top-to-top performance to the whole world publicly. And so the way we enable that is through our REST API combined with a reference app that we'll go into in the demo. So to show you a little bit of this in the product itself, I'm going to jump into a demo now. I'll talk through all of the main ones, and then Martin's going to jump into the detailed presentation of the web app. So to start with, here I am within the Gentic portal. And as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, Gentic has a whole bunch of different products. Synthetics happens to be one of them, Synthetics. And within Synthetics, the idea is you have these agents that are running the tests for you. You can go and set up tests with these agents, and then you can visualize all the information within the performance dashboard. So I'll start with agent management here. This is the screen you would go to look at all the agents that are available to you for use. And you can see on the map here that there are agents located in various parts of the world. So broadly speaking, Gentic offers two types of agents. There are the global agents, which are agents that Gentic hosts and manages as a service and provides you out of the box. So these are all agents that represent on the map with the Gentic logo on them. There is the same exact software image that is made available to all of our customers through a set of packages. And these include Debian, RPM, and Docker containers. And what you can do is you can basically pull down one of these Docker containers as an example and install it on any infrastructure that you might like that is able to support Docker container or even on Linux in general. So this might be something as lightweight as a Raspberry Pi, or it might be an AWS instance, or it might be a server running in your data center. So once you have those agents installed, they show up in this private agents tab. And so these are agents that are only visible to you, not to the rest of the Gentic customer base. And then once you have these agents set up, you would go basically into a test control center, and you would set up a test that looks like this. So this is a network mesh example of a network mesh test. All you've got to do now to set up a network mesh test is go ahead and click on edit agents, and you'll have the option of picking any of the private agents that you might have, as well as the global agents, and go ahead and save on that. Once you've saved all these agents in this list and given it a name, you have the option of optionally, choosing some advanced options here in terms of how often you want these tests to be running, what sort of thresholds you want to set for getting alerted on. If this happens to be a test that's running entirely within your network, you can use the private IPs to run that. You can choose what sort of protocols you want to be doing. We support UDP, TCP, and ICMP for the trace route, and then ICMP and TCP for ping, so on and so forth. And then once you set up this test and go ahead and click save, and notice that it basically takes just a few clicks to do this, you end up with something that looks like this. So this is that same mesh representation, but in this case, we've got about 8 different locations that we're testing between. And what's happening now is for every single time slice, which is every minute here, we're basically running ping, latency, packet loss, and jitter measurements from every one of these locations to every other location. So if I hover over one of these here, I can see that we're testing here from the GCP location between the AWS location in US West 1 to the GCP location in US West 1, and we're doing it both ways. Similarly, I can go over this, and I can go and look all of these over time. The other thing I can look at is the uptime of this test over time. So, this representation here is over the last 1 hour, every minute, what was the status of this test as a whole. You can quickly get a sense for points where there were some issues happening, as indicated by the orange here. And then once you notice an issue from there, you can quickly go and see, is that a metric that I care about? Is it a metric that I don't care about? So on and so forth. If you notice something that is of interest to you, you can then jump into the details of that. And then when you click on the details of that, you would see something that looks like this. So now we're looking at just that particular pair of locations. And you can look at sort of, each of these metrics over time. And so you can see here that there's a few jitter spikes, a few packet loss spikes in the middle. And you can quickly know if it's a transient issue or something that is persistent. And then if you identify one of these issues and you want to dig further, you can click on this path view, which now is showing you, which is basically showing you a visual trace route of the packets as they're going from point A to point B. So this is the actual trace route text, and then these are the nodes that we're going through. For each of these nodes, you can click on them. You can look at, what are the ASs that you're going through. If it happens to be a node that's within your own network and that's getting SNMP data, we'll pull in information like CPU and memory utilization for the device, egress and ingress capacity. So, if there's issues and reaching sort of limits on that, that could be potentially cause for packet loss and latency as well. So just some of the tools that you get for not just being able to proactively monitor, but also go the first step further and debug what the issue is and where it might be. So that's a general overview of mesh testing and how it can help you with proactive monitoring. But in terms of being able to collaborate with other people, as I mentioned, there's basically 3 ways you can do that. The first one is simply clicking on this share link here. What this does is basically allows you to be able to share this exact same visualization that you looked at with anybody outside of your organization. And so this might be somebody that has no access to Kentik. You don't want them to be able to see anything else. You can just go ahead and say, I want to share this link with, link share for somebody, right? And give a name here, and then enter the email recipients, and then it'll send them a link that they can just click on and look at this. So that's like option number 1, and it's the most easiest. The second option, as I mentioned, was something called My Kentik portal, which is our custom branded portal for you to be able to expose synthetic results to your customers and for them to log in and look at these behind a authenticated portal. So to give an example, here's one such portal. And when you set up these portals, you can essentially create your own logo for your own company, put them up here. So the specific customer that is looking at this doesn't even need to know that this is coming from Gentic. And then you can create any dashboards with the data that you have in Gentic and expose them to the customer. And then the last one is what I'm going to hand off to Martin for. But before I do that, basically I want to mention that all of the test results that you set up in Gentic, they're all accessible through an API, through a public API. So you can get all the information, all the data that you see in the portal through all of these get operations to read all the test results, but then you can also automate them in the sense that you can create these tests programmatically using the API, and that way you can automate test creation as well. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Martin to talk about the third way that you can share results. Go ahead, Martin.
Thank you, Anil. I would like to show you a couple of the tools that we made publicly available that utilize the Synthetics public API that Anil mentioned to further derive value from the data that you are collecting in Kentik. The first one is an example of web application that allows to visualize results of a synthetic mesh test. The main use case that we had in mind for creating this web app is presenting sort of a SLA dashboard. So let's say that you manage some infrastructure, you created a mesh test that measures the performance of the infrastructure between the important points, and you want to show to the general public how well you are adhering to the SLAs that you have presented. So you have the mesh test measuring the performance, but for your internal purposes, you probably set some thresholds which are more aggressive than your SLAs because you want to fix problems before the SLA is violated. But for the general public, you want to show the measurement against the actual SLA. So for that, we created the web application. It's freely available under Apache 2 license on GitHub. There is a short README that explains how to start the application, how to provide authentication information that it needs to talk to the Kentik API. And you have a couple options how to run it. You can run it directly on any host that is capable of running Python, or you can build a Docker container and run it that way. Let me show you quickly how the application looks, and then we get to how it's configured. So I'm running the application now, configured to display results of a mesh test that measures performance between the Google Cloud Platform US regions. I run it in a Docker on my MacBook, and it's fetching the data from the Kentik API. So what you see here is very similar to what you see in the Kentik portal. It's just so simplified and tuned to the purpose of just showing the adherence to the SLAs. So the main view is a matrix that shows all of the measurement points, and each cell is a test from the agent in the row to the agent in the column. In the top, you can select what the metric you want to display in the overview, and you have the three options that we give in the portal too. If you hover over the cell, you see more details about the agents, results for all of the metrics, and also the estimated great circle distance between the points, which is sort of defines the minimum latency. If you click on the cell, you should get a time series view similar as in the portal, but it appears that we are having some demo issues. I say I'm running it in my home or my network to Kentik API, so maybe there is some problem there. Sorry about that. Anyway, let's get to how you configure the application to show the results that you want to present to the public. The application is configured by a simple configuration file. When you download the code, there is an example of it which you can just customize. It's a YAML file. The main aspect that you have to configure is the test that you want to present. And then you can also set these thresholds for the coloring of the cells. And that allows you to have a different presentation in this publicly visible presentation than you have in Kentik portal. You can set the thresholds in two ways. You can set a default for that apply to any combination of agents, and then you can set overrides for particular pairs of agents, which is especially important for the latency view, where the latency very much depends on the distance between the agents. You can further customize the application, the visual aspects of the application by modifying style sheets that drive the layout and fonts and colors and other aspects. So that's the SLA web application. We also made publicly available a toolkit, which is a Python framework and a command line tool that allows to create read configuration and read results of synthetic tests. It's again available at GitHub. It has a README that explains how to use it. So that's all I have for the SLA web. Back to you, Anil.
Thank you, Martin. Going to steal the screen back from you. Awesome. So to sort of wrap up and summarize what we talked about today, hopefully what you saw from this is the kind of value that you get from mesh testing or from network meshes within Gentic. Essentially is, number one, you get to continuously monitor connectivity between any number of global points of presence or data centers. You get to do that proactively so that the moment there's an issue that happens, you get alerted about it and you get notified about it. Setting up these tests is extremely easy. So regardless of whether you're doing a 5-location mesh or a 50-location mesh, the setup is exactly the same. It takes the same number of clicks. We start with a really high-level denoised view so that you don't get drowned in information. And then when you identify issues from among hundreds or thousands of tests, you can quickly drill down and find the root cause of it using not just historical representation of the metrics, but also using a path visualization. And then last but not the least, once you identify an issue and you want to collaborate with somebody else, either within your company or outside of your company, we give you multiple ways of doing that, as well as for showcasing your own performance. And so we talked about sort of 3 ways that you can share these results. And these are sort of an increasing level of customization depending on what you're trying to achieve. The least amount of customization, as well as the easiest, is public link sharing. Just literally takes a couple of clicks and it's in the product already. Custom branded portal is something that you will need a few more clicks to do, where you set up a dashboard and then you create a Gentic portal with your own branding on it. And then you can expose that to customers who would then log in and look at the things that you want them to look at. And then the third, which is the most open and the most customizable one, is the one where you would utilize the synthetic monitoring API and essentially build your own version of these mesh tests that you can expose publicly. And to help you do that, Martin walked you through a reference GitHub repository and a GitHub application that lets you build something like exactly that. So hopefully this gives you what you need from the perspective of being able to not just monitor, but also share these results. If you're interested in exploring any of this further, I've got 2 things for you. Number one, if you head up over to kentik.com right now, you'll see this little try Kentik button on the top right corner there. If you click on that and set up an account today, you'll basically get 30 days of access to pretty much all of these features, as well as everything that Kentik offers, not just synthetics, other things as well. And then we'll also give you enough synthetic credits for you to be able to set up multiple mesh tests, be able to exercise all of these things without having to spend anything. And then if you're able to do that and you're interested in sort of having a more interactive session than this webinar, then we host something called a virtual design clinic, which is coming up in a few days from now. And if you sign up there, we'll send you some swag for that as well. With that, just one last question before we move over to Q&A. Cool. If you wouldn't mind taking this poll, it helps us sort of figure out if this is appealing, we should do something different in the future, so on and so forth. Sweet. Thank you, Jordan. All right. With that, we'll take questions if there's any.
Yeah. So thanks, Anil. Mine was a great presentation. We did get a few questions that came in the chat, so we'll open those up right now. So the first one is, can this info via API be pushed for some real-time reporting?
Yeah, so I kind of typed a response while Martin was presenting, but I'll talk through it as well. Basically, in addition to the things we talked about today, which is public link shares, MKP, and the API, we actually have a fourth option. We just didn't include it for the sake of time. The fourth option is essentially what we refer to as a Gentic fire hose. So like when you think about an API is all about polling periodically and getting data from a platform. The fire hose is the opposite of that, which is taking a bunch of data and pushing it to some sort of third-party platform. So I dropped a link in the chat for more information on Firehose, but essentially the idea is you can take any data that's sitting in Kentik, push it to other observability systems like New Relic or Splunk, or you can even push it to a data lake for your own analysis, that sort of thing.
Awesome. So the next question is, I have a private network. Can I use this mesh to test connectivity within it?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned during the demo, there's basically two types of agents. There's the global agents that we provide out of the box, but then the same exact binary is also available to you to install on your own infrastructure. And so if you happen to have a network that's entirely composed of just your routers or your devices, you can install them within that and you can test within them as well.
Awesome. So how can I find more information about the reference web app?
I think Martin already dropped a couple of links in the chat. You can just click on those GitHub repos. If you have questions, we'll pop up a email that you can email us to as well to get in touch with us. But yeah, should be all there.
And the last question is, how do you price all this?
So really straightforward. Basically, every synthetic test that runs gets priced in terms of something called credits. And the straightforward answer is if you're running a test from a private agent, we charge you 2.5 credits for every minute that it's running. And if it's running from a global agent, we'll charge you 5 credits for every minute. Now, if you slow down the test, for example, if you say you want to be running it only every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes, then it basically scales accordingly. So it'll be basically 1/5 of the cost if you're running it every 5 minutes. So if you have any questions about pricing, you reach out to us as well.
Great. So
I think there was one more question.
One last question that's all come in. So what is the coverage of these global agent locations? Basically, will it give us a good sense of connectivity across the largest ASNs or all ASNs or some other middle ground?
That's a great question. So I just popped on to the global agent page again, or the agent management page again. And broadly, there's like two or three types of agents within the global agent list. We've got agents that are deployed within transit service providers, so people like Cogent, obviously the public cloud providers, TACPath, a whole bunch of different ASs here, Exoscale. But then we also have these agents called broadband agents that are specifically focused on broadband ISPs. So this would be Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, so on and so forth. This agent list is constantly updated. So every month we're constantly looking and talking to other providers that we can get source, agents within. And so you'll see this list constantly increase over time. If there's specific ASNs that you want us to install agents within, then definitely reach out to us and let us know.
So it looks like we've come up on time. We'd like to thank you all for joining in today, and we've covered a lot of material. So this webinar was recorded, so you can review a replay of it on our website, that's kentik.com, and please share it with your interested colleagues. So in the next couple of days, you'll get an email from us as well, so you can review the content, get a link to the recording, and get any other additional information that you'd like. So if you have any other further questions, please email us at webinars@kentik.com. And thank you again for joining, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.